My name is Brad Pauquette. Welcome to day one of the Novel Challenge. I am excited to get started with you. So, as we explained in day zero orientation, this first week we're going to focus on learning some of the fundamental structures and systems that are going to make you effective in your novel writing. And if you're anything like a lot of writers, you might at first have some pushback to that. Where we tend to be free spirits. We want to serve at the whim of the muse, right? When we're writers, because we are artists, and this is creative work. And while all of that is true, and I respect that mindset, it's not typically a mindset that's held by successful authors. The reality of writing a novel-length manuscript is that it is too big of a project to just wing it. I mean, statistically, it just doesn't work out for most authors. There are too many variables, too many parameters to consider. And really, it's too much work to only sit down when you feel inspired. A novel-length work, by definition, is at least 50,000 words long. Let me tell you that I don't care who you are. In the course of writing 50,000 words, there are times when you are just not going to feel inspired. You're just not going to feel the creative juice that day. And so the question is, are you going to sit down and do the work anyways or not? And so successful authors have learned to push past that feeling and do the art even when they're not feeling creative, even when they're not inspired. And systems and structure help us to do that. We see the same thing with every art form. Culinary arts, right? Chefs are artists, absolutely. And they go to work 5 days a week, 6 days, 7 days a week for a lot of chefs. Do you think they only make great food when they feel creative and inspired? No, not at all. That would be ridiculous. People that felt that way wouldn't be successful in their industry. Instead, they've learned to exercise discipline that they can show up and they can do the job whether they feel like it or not. And that's the same thing that we need for you. And so that's why we're going to teach you these systems and structures. Let me give you a few examples from my life. So I've had the pleasure of working with a number of great authors over the years. And I want to tell you about the last two books that I had the privilege of working on through my company before I gave away my company to my number two, and I started what would become the company. And so I'm not cherry picking or anything. These are literally the last two books that I worked on. So I'm going to tell you about Lies and Bones by Natalie Simons. So this book spent, I think, an entire month as the number one book on Audible overall. It might have been a week. I'd have to double check that. Really should have double checked it before I started this show, right? But nonetheless, this was the number one book on Audible overall. So not just like in its niche category or something like that, but the number one most downloaded book on all of Audible. So I helped Natalie to rearrange her story, to edit her story, and to be the best possible story that it could be. Another book, this is the other second to last book that I worked on, was Threshing of Straw by Kim Catron. And so this book has been out for, I want to say 3 years now, going on at least, and continue. We sell many copies of this book every single day, over 25,000 copies sold. And so, these are literally the last two books that I worked on. And I don't tell you that to brag at all, but I want you to be confident in the kind of guide you're following. My job is to help you through this process. I think it's important that you know that I know what I'm doing, that I know what I'm talking about. And what I've found working with authors like Kim and Natalie and so many others in the stack here is that people who are serious about doing this as a profession, people that are actually putting out good work, have learned to embrace structure and discipline in the way that they do it. And let me give you a couple of other examples. So, did you know that wedding cake bakers typically don't make their own cake batter? They use a box mix. Now, I'm sure that's not universally true, but for many wedding cake bakers, they use boxed mixed cake batter in order to make their wedding cakes. Why? Well, I presume that it's because the artistry in making a wedding cake isn't actually in taste and texture of the cake itself. You just need something that's good enough, that's going to set up in a predictable way for the structure of the cake, because the artistry in making a wedding cake goes into the decorations, goes into the way the frosting is and the flowerets and the other embellishments that they put on it, right? You just need a cake that works so that your artistry can adorn that structure. Same thing would be true with hot rods. So hot rods are an art form. I don't know if you've ever been to a car show that has a lot of really cool custom hot rods, but that is absolutely artistry. It reflects creativity, ingenuity, reflects the personality and values of the artist is inherent in that piece of artwork. And even though it's art, all hot rods have similarities, right? Every hot rod has tires, has a steering wheel, has a transmission, has a motor, has seats, right? Has all these same components. Yet we don't look at a hot rod and say, oh, well, that's not really art because you used similar components as other people. Imagine if we expected every hot rod to be completely unique from every other hot rod. That would be ridiculous. And writing a long form story like a novel is no different. There are certain components of story that don't make the project formulaic, but rather just give a story structure so that readers know how to understand the story. So, as humans, there are particular ways that we know intuitively to understand a story. So, consider these two examples. So, in this first story, Joe, who is an accountant, wakes up one morning and he decides that he is going to murder every member of the Zambino crime family. And so he embarks on an endless vigilante mission. Okay, that's the first story. Here's the second story. Joe, who is an accountant, wakes up on a Tuesday morning following the funerals of his entire family who have been killed by the Zambino crime family. Joe wakes up, decides that he is going to kill every member of the Zambino family, and embarks on that mission. Now, which of the stories is more believable? Well, of course, the second one, because the first one, where Joe just randomly wakes up and arbitrarily decides on this crazy mission, that doesn't make any sense. That's not how you've learned that people operate in the world. Instead, you've learned that people have to have a cause. There's a cause and effect relationship, right? So something has to have happened so that Joe can react to that to embark on something as outrageous as a vigilante mission. So you have this fundamental rule in your mind, whether you've thought about it or before or not, it's intuitive, that in order for people to do things, there has to be a really good reason. And so those are the type of structures that we're going to look at as we move forward. And it gets a little bit more complex than that. There's more to it than that, because the fact is that you've been hearing the same story over and over and over again for your entire life. And you might be saying, yeah, Marvel movies and Disney movies and things like that. And while that's true, actually these structures and these systems that are part of stories are actually in practically every story you've ever read. Practically every movie that you've ever seen. The movie that you think is absolutely original and isn't like anything else, it is. And I'm going to show you how that works as we move forward. And I think, it's fundamental human psychology in the way that we relate to stories. And when we understand that psychology just a little bit, we can learn to hit the story marks that people need in order to be able to understand and relate to a story. But then, just like a wedding cake designer layers their artistry on top of that, we still have tons of room that you get to make the story and the characters your own. You get to do things that nobody has done before between those points. I like to say that the novel matrix, which is the system that we're going to learn, is a skeleton for your story, not a coffin. So we're going to give you some structure and you get to put the flesh on that. Obviously, like my wife and I, we're very different people. But if you strip away all of our flesh and things like that, and you just have skeletons, I suppose like an anthropologist could tell the difference. Like this one was a man and that one was a woman. But we would look almost identical as skeletons, right? But yet, of course, we are incredibly unique and different people from each other. The same would be true of you and I. And so with this novel matrix method, we're going to learn these structures that give you a skeleton for your story so that you can put the flesh on it, so that you can develop something, but you know that the body will function after you've done your creative work. So I want you to learn more about this. Over the next 4 days, we're going to do a really surface level thing on this because I want to keep you moving quickly towards your goals. We're going to do about 20 minutes on each of four really important topics. However, there's a lot more to be said. That's why I want you to check out the Novel Matrix book, which was written by me, Brad Pauquette. And I want you to check out the Novel Matrix classes on the company website. Those are both going to go to a deeper level. So I respect you guys that are like, hey, I only have 1 hour a day. That was the commitment. You can get this done and you'll have enough information to start to be dangerous by the end of this week. But if you can muster a little bit more time, or even, the rest of this 40-minute hour, hop over to the company's website, watch some of these videos, get some additional knowledge, some more depth on these topics, and it's going to pay off for you. Finally, one of the things that I think is most valuable about the Novel Matrix method that we're going to learn is that it does provide you those essential structures and systems that are going to make your storytelling really work. And it's also going to make a novel length project like this manageable and doable for you, so that it's not just this crazy unknown amount of work, but there are really predictable steps that you can take. And if you take the steps in order, you'll get to the end. So it's going to give you that, but at the same time, it's not going to overly complicate it. That's kind of the other end of the system, right? We have some people saying, oh, you don't need to know anything. Just follow your heart, follow your dreams, let your heart be your guide, things like that. And again, on a professional level, that's really not true. That's not something that plays out very well. But on the other hand, we have a lot of people, especially coming from like higher academia and things like that have made literary theory so complex, it's practically unusable. And really, that doesn't pan out either. It's great for people that live in those academic environments where, you need to innovate in order to stay relevant. You need to make things more complex and more complex and more complex. But the theory has become more complex than the actual subject, than the actual source. And so we're not going to go to that level. We're going to strip away a lot of the fat at the same time and just say, here are the essentials. Here's what every story does. And really, after that, truly do follow your heart, be creative, be inspired, do whatever you want with it. So I'm excited to move forward on this with you. You have an assignment. It's the first day, and your assignment for the rest of your hour today is to begin brainstorming novel ideas. So the system I'm going to show you, you can have even a little nugget of an idea, and the system will help you to develop that into a robust idea. But you do need a nugget. So the nugget could be a character that you think is really cool. Maybe a man or a woman has occurred to you, or a fictional beast or an alien or whatever has occurred to you that you think would be really cool to write about. Well, start jotting that down a little bit. What are they like? Describe them. What are their interests? What's their backstory and origin and things like that? And you don't have to go overboard, but just start rolling that over in your mind. Maybe you have a seed of an idea for the plot. Like maybe there's an interesting plot twist or a premise that has occurred to you. Maybe you have the beginning, maybe you have the end of the plot. It doesn't matter. Again, whatever you have, just start jotting that down. That thing that's been toying in the back of your mind, it's time to move it to the front of your mind so that you can actively pursue it. Perhaps there's an issue that you want to talk about. This is true of a lot of writers that I've worked with through the company, given that we help Christian writers to tell stories that impact the world in positive ways. A lot of writers will come to me and they say, I really want to write a story about this particular topic, this particular subject, this particular argument that our culture is having right now. And that's fine. If that's you, again, jot it down, start penning out, like, why is that important to you? What specifically bothers you about that? Is there something that you want to make sympathetic in that? Or is there an enemy that you want to expose? Start developing those ideas in a real way. Again, that thing that's been in the back of your mind, time to bring it to the front. And what I would really like to see you do is develop more than one of those ideas. So you might have one or two things that have been around for a while and you kind of know a little bit about them, but really force yourself to get weird and creative. Come up with an idea that you never thought of before. And the irony is that when I force people to do this, oftentimes it's that idea that's sort of like out of left field that they just came up with because I said you had to do 3 or whatever. Oftentimes it's that idea that they actually start to pursue. Sometimes it's helpful to just have a blank slate, to be starting fresh and to get all that new idea, energy, and put it to your advantage. So, whatever the case, your assignment today is to begin that brainstorming process. Really draw to the forefront the ideas that you want to pursue. So, this is day one. I'm excited for the next 89 days. It's really incredible when you think about the fact that less than 3 months from now, you'll be looking at a complete manuscript. And I'm sure it won't be perfect yet. That's not the point. The point of drafting a manuscript isn't perfection. The point of drafting a manuscript is for it to be done. And so you'll still need to revise and things like that. But 3 months from now, you will have a manuscript that is ready to roll and roll on to the next steps, at least. And that excites me for you. I'm so glad to be a part of your journey. I'm so glad to be able to see you move in a real way towards these goals you set for yourself. So thanks for joining me today. I will look forward to speaking to you again tomorrow. Be blessed.